Part 2. Crown Prince Jung Bahadur grew taller and stronger day by day. No other miracle marked his childhood days apart from the event already described. The boy drank the milk of an English cow, was brought up by an English nanny, tutored in English by an Englishman, saw nothing but English films, exactly as the crown princes of all the other Indian states did. When he came of age at 20, the state, which had been with the court of wards until then, came to his hands. But everyone in the kingdom remembered the astrologer's prediction. Many continued to discuss the matter. Slowly, it came to the Maharaja's ears. There were innumerable forests in the Pratibhanandapuram state. They had tigers in them. The Maharaja knew the old saying, "You may even kill a cow in self-defense." There could certainly be no objection to killing tigers in self-defense. The Maharaja started out on a tiger hunt. The Maharaja was thrilled beyond measure when he killed the first tiger. He sent for the state astrologer and showed him the dead beast. "What do you say now?" he demanded. "Your Majesty may kill 99 tigers in exactly the same manner. But what? Speak without fear." "But you must be very careful with the 100th tiger." "What if the 100th tiger were also killed?" "Then I'll tear up all my books on astrology, set fire to them, and I shall cut off my tuft, crop my hair short, and become an insurance agent." The astrologer finished on an incoherent note. Here is the list of important words and their meanings. Now here is the recap for the section. Maharaja of Pratibhanandapuram was brought up in an all-English environment like every other prince of every other Indian princely state of his times. Until he grew up, the state of Pratibhanandapuram was in the hands of Court of Wards, a legal body of trustees consisting the officials of East India Company. They were entitled to manage the stately affairs in case of death, invalid state, or any other cause of the monarch being incapable of active ruling. The council will handle state affairs until the minor prince comes of age. The moment the crown prince gets the stately powers, he was reminded of the prophecy. He was of the ideology, even a cow, which is supposed to be the sanest and the most sober animals, can be killed when it comes to self-defense. So he set off for tiger hunt and was even successful in killing one too. In arrogance and self-importance, he calls for the state astrologer to tell him that he was the victor over his enemy tiger, as opposed to the prophecy he gave long ago. The astrologer implies that the king could kill several like this, but his death would be due to tigers only. 100 was just a number and not exact though. The king understands the statement of the astrologer so plainly and fails to read between lines. The astrologer swears to give up his original profession and to take up that of an insurance agent, which is so unpopular and avoided by the majority as a difficult one. Now let's look at the implications the events of this section suggest frame by frame. Number 1. The Maharaja's upbringing in an all-English atmosphere. This suggests the snobbishness of the so-called aristocrats. They consider themselves eligible for all things superior. In Maharaja's time, why, even now, we consider anything foreign superior and anything indigenous inferior, don't we? Secondly, the Maharaja's ideology of self-defense. In what way Maharaja entering the tiger's fortress wantonly and killing them qualifies for self-defense? The self-defense logic applies only when the tiger enters Maharaja's fortress and attempts to kill him. Don't you think the same logic applies for the tiger too? in either way? Thirdly, Maharaja's haughtiness in summoning the state astrologer. This tells a lot on Maharaja's power drunkenness and superiority complex. It is also paradoxical that a Maharaja who was not afraid of tigers had taken the prophecy so seriously. These are points for you to ponder in this section. From that day onwards, it was celebration time for all the tigers inhabiting Pratibhanandapuram. The state banned tiger hunting by anyone except the Maharaja. A proclamation was issued to the effect that if anyone dared to fling so much as a stone at a tiger, all his wealth and property would be confiscated. The Maharaja vowed he would attend to all other matters only after killing 100 tigers. Initially, the killing seemed well set to realize his ambition. Not that he faced no dangers. There were times when the bullet missed its mark, the tiger leapt upon him, and he fought the beast with his bare hands. Each time, it was the Maharaja who won. At another time, he was in danger of losing his throne. A high-ranking British officer visited Pratibhanandapuram. He was very fond of hunting tigers and fonder of being photographed with the tigers he had shot. As usual, he wished to hunt tigers in Pratibhanandapuram, but the Maharaja was firm in his resolve. He refused permission. "I can organize any other hunt. You may go on a boar hunt. You may conduct a mouse hunt. We are ready for a mosquito hunt. But tiger hunt? That's impossible." The British officer's secretary sent word to the Maharaja through the Diwan that Durai himself did not have to kill the tiger. The Maharaja could do the actual killing. What was important to the Durai was a photograph of himself holding the gun and standing over the tiger's carcass. But the Maharaja would not agree even to this proposal. If he relented now, what would he do if other British officers turned out for tiger hunts? Because he prevented a British officer from fulfilling his desire, the Maharaja stood in danger of losing his kingdom himself. The Maharaja and the Diwan held deliberations over this issue. As a result, a telegram was dispatched forthwith to a famous British company of jewelers in Calcutta. Sent samples of expensive diamond rings of different designs. Some 50 rings arrived. The Maharaja sent the whole lot to the British officer's good lady. The king and the minister expected the Duraisani to choose 1 or 2 rings and send the rest back. Within no time at all, the Duraisani sent her reply, "Thank you very much for your gifts." In 2 days, a bill of 3 lakh rupees came from the British jewelers. The Maharaja was happy that though he had lost 3 lakh rupees, he had managed to retain his kingdom. Here is the list of important words and their meanings. Here are some points to ponder from this section. Let's read Maharaja's proclamation once again. No one should fling as much as a stone even at a tiger. If they even dared to do so, they will face dire consequences. But Maharaja himself has the right even to kill all the animals from cow to tigers in defense or offense. Hasn't Maharaja monopolized killing of animals here? Think about it. Secondly, Maharaja's prioritizing tiger hunt. It is a paradox. He proves for the time and again that he is wacky and self-contradictory. A person who, in order to disprove the prophecy false, rather taken it so seriously. In the pursuit of running away from the death, he runs closer to it. He postpones all the other stately matters indefinitely, proves his poor reasoning capacity and fallacy of judgment. Now let's discuss the British officer's plea to Raja and Raja's rejecting it. The British officer is fond of killing tigers, fonder of being photographed with it. He didn't mind being photographed with a tiger killed by someone else. This proves his false pride and his attitude of gaining at others' cost. Now, Maharaja's rejection of British officer's plea appears to be a bold decision. It was in fact an unrealistic and a brash one, for which he had to pay a price of 3 lakhs in the form of diamond rings to Duraisani, which again accounts for corruption. Now, Duraisani's keeping of all the diamond rings depicts her greediness and artfulness and even power mongering. Now, this also proves that corruption only breeds corruption.